Hello, everybody. Welcome to Global Party Healing on All Levels. And this is the wonderful thing is Bev Roberts is in Australia and I'm in Canada, and we are linked together at this global party. And we are going to hear from Bev and how she has gone from surviving to thriving. And this is what it's all about, isn't it, Bev?
Absolutely. This is what life is for. It's for thriving.
So you're in for a real treat, and you can see by the beaming glow on Bev's face that if you actually took a moment and paused, you'd probably guess what song she picked. What song did you pick that you enjoy, Bev?
I love Happy by Pharrell Williams.
So we're going to play a little bit of it. You know, it's going to be a little tinny. We'll play it. You can play it again later, but here we go. We could keep going because we like the song so much. Drew, did you ever do the 24-hour one when he did Happy for 24 hours?
No.
He played it for 24 hours. It was a video. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know. It was about, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 6 years ago or something. But yeah, we had it going all day long in our house. Dun, dun.
It's really catchy.
It is. So once upon a time, you weren't so happy.
No. And that person who I was, I don't recognize anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad about that. It's, you know, when I first became unwell, I had my identity attached to my career. So I was an award-winning board-certified executive, and so I had a very lucrative job. I loved my job. I was very passionate about what I did. I actually was one of those fortunate consultants that also got just tapped on the shoulder to get new work. So I did major projects in Sydney and Australia and across Australia. And what I just noticed is that I never had an off button. I was completely consumed with my work. I had no space in my head, in my life, for anything else. And on reflection, when I look back, I realized that a lot of it was trying to prove myself. I was trying to prove that I was worthy of this money. I was proving myself that I was worthy of, you know, acceptance. A lot of things I was trying to prove myself at. So, yeah, coming from that space to where I am now, it's just such a different perspective of my life. And obviously, you know, my health suffered really greatly because when you're under that much stress for so long, you know, the body was trying to give me signals. Slow down, slow down. I wasn't paying attention. And it stopped me in my tracks. I actually have not gone back to that job for nearly 5 years now. So, yeah.
So, but if you had the opportunity now to go back to that job, would you?
I'm not so sure because I think I didn't understand what my purpose in life was at that time. And when I started my career, you know, just leaving high school, I actually was in the medical field. And here I find myself all these years later in my sagehood, working in that medical realm, supporting people to be well. So, yeah, it's different. The thought of corporate life does not fill me with joy. So I recognize that actually some of this has been, this whole part of my journey has been to bring me to this place of wholeness myself. So yes, in the beginning I missed it and I grieved. I spent a lot of time grieving that loss because I didn't have an identity outside of work. You know, I had 2 children, and yes, I was a mother, so I had a role to play. But, you know, on reflection, I wasn't available really to them when they were teenagers because my head was somewhere else. Even if I was physically there, I wasn't present.
So you were a successful career working woman all through as your children were growing up?
No, this
No?
is the interesting thing for me. I never had aspirations of a career like that.
Okay.
And what ended up happening is, so my youngest child was about 3 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a stay-at-home mom with a part-time job. So I was, when they were at, you know, play school in the morning, I was at work, and then I'd be home with them in the afternoon. And then my partner at the time, and a lot of things unfolded because I didn't understand what had happened, and I only found out some of the truths later. But the role that he had was made redundant, and he made some choices that changed the course of my life. Because we had no income,
Mm-hmm.
I felt that need to step up.
Right.
And I stepped up, and I never stopped. I just kept climbing the ladder. So I didn't find the balance that I needed. I didn't integrate life, work in any shape or form. So what I did is I ended up sort of, you know, getting very masculine in my energy, I think.
Right.
And that didn't serve my family.
Right. I can totally relate to your story. Mine happened at a much earlier age. I was still single, but it was 28 when I had to give up corporate because like I had stress the size of golf balls in my back, like when I'd go for a massage, because I was already doing some little things like that holistically. And I just felt like, you know, what was the purpose of having all these accolades and stuff? And so I, you know, had my eat, pray, love moment, as I say, that one weekend, and took off to Africa and never went back again. And I feel like my part of my journey in getting out of my chronic illness is because now I can relate and help others. And I'm sure that's what you're saying too, is high school, you went into this medical area. Now you're really helping people deal with their chronic symptoms and giving them hope that they can thrive again.
Yes, because I don't know, you know, for it's different for everybody who is dealing with a chronic illness. But I see, Jacqueline, that there's some foundational things that I needed to learn in my journey back to well-being. And what I recognize now is it's the way that, because, you know, I'd been a coach all these years in corporate as well. I've coached people to high potential. I've coached people around their personal issues. So it's not about the coaching aspect of my work now, but it's supporting people to integrate that physical, mental, emotional, and soulful aspects of themselves, because they are not apart. You know, when there's a physical symptom in the body, it's usually linked to an emotion or an event. And so it's hard for people to understand that. And I don't believe that people bring things on themselves. But what I do know is that we make choices all along the way of our lives, and there's consequence of choice. And
okay, so let me just stop you there for a second, okay, because I think that's very important what you just said, because some people have heard that, you know, when you say brought it on themselves, that they created, because we're about a creative universe, so they created somehow this illness. And what you're saying is, no, however, you have patterns or things that you've been doing all your life, and it's kind of like things get compounded, and all of a sudden, oof, this unworthiness, for instance, that you said, oh no, I can do this, I can become something that grows inside, and all of a sudden there is this maybe deep-seated resentment that manifests into something else. Is that more what we're talking about here? Okay.
Yes. So I don't, you know, for anyone who's been chronically ill, having somebody say that you manifested illness is neither helpful or gives them hope. So it doesn't move you forward. It actually keeps you stuck. So what I'm talking about there is to understand, yes, you're dealing with a physical illness, but get the other aspects of your life into balance and integrate them so that you can heal. And I love a quote. There's a quote that Chris Carr uses, and she says that healing is for everybody, but they may not get a cure. And I'm maybe quoting it out of context. So it's not that you're going to be cured of what ails you. Let's say if you've got a chronic infection, but the process of actually focusing on your whole well-being is the thing that brings you wholeness and therefore healing. So it's just a nice difference in those two aspects.
Yeah, I think people generally have been trained to want a result. So they have an idea of what a cure is, but healing is a process because it's on multiple levels. That's why we're talking healings on all levels. My mother had some issue that they could not comprehend, but in the process, I was aware that she was being healed on so many other levels before she finally went home, as I call it. And I think anything can be healed, just like a cut, but not necessarily every person in what they perceive to be that idea of a cure, because we are multifaceted.
And you thank goodness we do have a Western medical system because we need it in crisis. However, it has also taught us to see aspects of the body as separate. So if you have an ear problem, you go to an ear specialist. If you have a heart problem, you go to a heart specialist. So it doesn't help us understand that the body is a finely tuned set of processes and systems that are just so awesome, and they all are playing off one another. They don't stand alone. So usually if you've got a heart problem, it hasn't come about just because the heart has a problem. There's been a problem in the blood. There's been a problem with stress. There's, and so on. It's just, so that's where I find that trying to understand how you can integrate the way, for example, the mental aspect, the self-talk, the way you think. Do you see the glass half empty or half full? All of those things will influence your physical health. And then if you look at the emotional side, if you think of, we've been taught also that, for example, anger is not good, so you don't display anger. And yet if you suppress anger, that's the very thing that will make you unwell. So if you can learn to healthfully express your emotions and not label them as good or bad, you're in a much better place. And you can also then start to set boundaries around those things. So, for example, one of the things that when I first start working with somebody is I look at their support network. Because if you surround yourself with people who are uplifting, who actually love you unconditionally, you don't need to explain your illness to them. They just accept what is. That is a much better place to heal. And then with the soulful stuff is, like I said to you earlier, is not returning to corporate. It was my learning and my journey, because I realized that my purpose is beyond me being in corporate, doing those great things for corporate companies, and I think then if you can understand that integrating those four aspects together, that's when you start to feel, and you're taking ownership, you're taking responsibility. I find a lot of time with chronic illness is we give over our personal power to the medical system. And that's not healthy. We need to stand in our truth, stand in our power. And like at my sickest days, I needed to take someone with me because I didn't feel powerful. But I would have someone with me, and there was an incident where a learned professor, let's call him learned because he has learned stuff, looked at me kindly, well, maybe he was kind, and said, "How's your mental health?" And my friend just looked at him and said, "What can't you see? Can't you see how sick she is?" You know, so she was being bold for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was.
So when you, so can you give a label, for instance, to your chronic illness? Was there one, or was it like a series of symptoms that just caused you to be surviving?
I had a few labels,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because in my book I talk about naming the beast, and often we wait until we've got a name or a label to act. And so having a label can sometimes be really limiting. So one of the labels I received was chronic fatigue syndrome.
Right.
And then it means that you'll probably never be healed. And I thought, this is not, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. I know what my body's telling me, but you know what? I don't want that label. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And other things along the way. But it was a mix, I would say it was a constellation of symptoms, because at first I thought, you know, I gave this to myself. This is my story. You're just exhausted. You're just burnt out. I kept putting just something. And I also did my Eat, Pray, Love 3-month away, you know, to try and recover. I thought I was going to come back and be awesome.
Right.
No, I learned a lot about myself because I traveled solo, and that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Did I rest? Yes, I learned la dolce fa niente, the sweetness of doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was beautiful for me. But was I healed? No, because the fundamental things around what I was dealing with, chronic infection, which was causing chronic fatigue, that hadn't been addressed. So, you know, it's multifaceted because the body is just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. And it had put up with what I would call some level of abuse from me, because although I ate well, I exercised well, that whole aspect of my emotional and my mental health
Mm-hmm.
and my soulful health had no attention.
Right.
You know, I never stopped. You know, I guess I was spiritual on one level, but I had never meditated. I had never sat still in that space and just listened, you know, for the call of my own soul. I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
So, you know, being so disconnected from that, and then that's why I say my body did stop me in my tracks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a very important point for everybody that's watching is, first of all, whether you're all the way on this scale and having chronic illness, okay, or you're just maybe you're starting to realize that you're in this, what they like to call stress. Your body is your barometer. Your body is telling you, because when you're joyful, you're freeing and you're flowing and life is working, your body is moving. So your body's talking to you. And I always get a kick now because everybody wants to talk about mindfulness, and I go, you know, that's great, but last I checked, we were much more than a mind. You know, so be aware of what's going on in your body. So in that instance, you start to become aware, and then it's about making a choice. Is it, first of all, to say, do you want to go, like, do you want to open the door to say, I'd love there to be a healing, right? And I'm open to the possibility that there could be something beyond the medical system? Or do you want to just stay where you are? Because don't you have to make a decision before something happens? Or a
Absolutely.
choice?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think is the most helpful for anyone in any difficult space of chronic illness is to set a powerful intention. You know, what will you do, have, be, feel in that space of health and healing? And not get fixated on the specifics, but get very clear on, you know, for example, what would you be able to do with that new energy and that new love and joy? What would you be feeling at the time? You know, how will you be in yourself? And so instead of just using words like I'll be healed, it will be like I'll be able to play with my grandchildren and invest my time in them so that they thrive too. And, so get very clear with an intention and use that intention and stick it everywhere. Feed the mind with it, feed the soul with it, make sure that, physically, mentally, emotionally, you are connected to that, intention, because it's really powerful. And one of the other things I talk about is when you're unwell, often it's really difficult to participate in life as you knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep looking back. You're going, if only, what if, and that's not helpful either. So to project into presence, being present, and project into the future so that you can take all those aspects of yourself with you, is to look at areas that you can slow down and contemplate. So that's where I really learned to meditate, because that was what was helping me to bring all these bits of myself together, and acceptance, so I had to work through forgiveness. There was a lot of things that I felt I dealt with in the past, but I realized it was unfinished business still.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time working through forgiveness, using tools like Ho'oponopono.
So Bev, can you just explain what Obopono, what was it that you said there?
It's Ho'oponopono. It's an ancient Hawaiian practice, and it actually takes you through 4 stages. And you can do them in any order, but there is an order that you normally do this. And it's about expressing love for yourself or the other person. It's about saying sorry and sincerely for what has happened and your role in that. And it's about, asking for forgiveness and then, moving forward from there. So it's a very beautiful practice, and it doesn't require you to say this to somebody. So it's kind of soul to soul, heart to heart. And yes, I guess if there is an opportunity to say this in person, the thing is that if it's a very deep wound, the person may still be wounded themselves and so on. So, and if it's really far back in the past, or the person has passed on and you don't have the opportunity to say it face to face. So it's a really beautiful practice, and it just allows, I think, as I said, for me, the forgiveness was that it was part of the healing. And was it a cure? I don't know. I think it was part and parcel of supporting my body to let go of the cellular trauma. And that, also what I feel around holding on to those things. And I didn't even realize I was holding on to some things, some aspects. So for example, just an example so that people understand what I'm talking about is, I was 14 when my father suddenly passed. And I never got the opportunity to say goodbye. And what also happened on that day, so he had taken me to play a game of hockey, and he then dropped me at a friend's house. And later that afternoon, he had a heart attack. And the lady that I was, she was friends with my mother. I'm not sure who made the decision, so it's not really the decision that matters. But she came into the room where we were. She said, "Your father's died, and I've told your mother you'll be staying here."
She told you just like that?
Just like that.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And so if you look at the aspects of that event, for me, is I felt complete abandonment by my family. So nobody, none of my sisters, nor my brother, nor my mother came to pick me up. So I was on my own. She didn't like my father. It was clear that she never liked my father, but her inability to show me any compassion was just dumbfounding. But what ended up happening for me is that I closed off emotionally.
Yeah.
So I didn't even grieve for my father because everybody told me I was doing okay.
Right.
And so in this process of using forgiveness, I could look with compassion on my family, because I asked them in later years, why didn't you come and pick me up? Why did this happen? Nobody has an answer. And so trying to go back to a point and make it right doesn't happen. So to get peace for myself, I needed to forgive every person in that event. Even my father for leaving me, because I didn't know my mother. My mother was a nurse and she worked many hours. She was not available physically as well as emotionally to me. But in that whole journey, I didn't understand that. It took me years to understand that actually I hadn't grieved my father. At 14, I can remember hearing my mother say, she's fine, she's doing fine. And I thought, okay, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. So, I could stay stuck in that thing, but I realized that part of my healing now, in this process in these last couple of years has been to completely heal of that event.
And I think that's so wonderful that you're to share this, because so many of the viewers have some event that went on in their life. Like, if they take a moment and really ask themselves, they know it's a place maybe they don't even want to go, but it's where the hurt and the pain has started to seed, and it does grow. And how well this exercise of forgiveness works, you can go and you can Google it, because it came to be because there was a doctor in he was a psychiatrist, I believe, and he would take the files of the patients and he would just use this prayer over the files of the patients. He never spoke to the patients, he never went to see the patients, and the patients all got better by saying, I love you, I forgive you, forgive me. There's something else to it, right? I always miss the fourth part. But essentially that's the scoop, is you're the only one that ever hears you. It's the same thing when you're driving in the car and the person cuts you off and you get angry and you're like, oh, okay, the person that cut you off is still jiving to their music and they're happy, and you're the one that's left with the emotion. So if you can just allow your body and yourself to come into awareness that your body's uncomfortable with whatever it was, and that Bev just gave you a gem right now and gave you permission to tap into that unresolved issue for yourself, because that's where your healing can begin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that it's nothing that you need to share with others, so there's no shame or blame or judgment attached to it. You can just be with yourself. And what I encourage people to do, and this is why I wrote it in my book, because you need a process. So if you've got a difficult space like that to be in, you need a process. And some people like to go to someone else to do that process, but honestly, when it's something like this that takes time, because as I say, it's not going to be a one hit and you're going to have unpacked your suitcase and moved on to the place called peace. It's not going to be like that. And it just allows you to keep moving through that process, and how to write down the grievance, so how to write the grievance so that you can let it go and leave it behind over time. And it just supports, I find it a beautiful practice. And I think, so you've got an intention, you do this forgiveness process, but then also the other thing that's really important here, Jacqueline, is to ensure that you have goals that move you forward from the place when you were the most sick, not the person that you were before. So, for example, before I was unwell, I was probably incredibly fit, doing personal training, all those sort of things. And yet I looked upon getting to the top of the driveway as, yeah, you know, but I should be walking. I could be, you know, all that. And that's
should all over yourself.
Yeah. Just not, it's not going to work. So having small goals, small achievable goals that move you forward from not, let's say, for example, not being able to get out of bed. That's, so every day you get out of bed, celebrate that, create the joy around that. Oh, I got out of bed today, you know, or for me at the moment, it's more, I didn't have a nap today. Oh, you know.
Yeah.
So the measure is just different to what it was before, and accept that, embrace that, you know. But it just, I can see for myself, for example, socially, before I could not keep a social engagement because sometimes I just couldn't show up.
Right.
And I worked out that pushing past my physical boundaries was not healthy for me. And so I had a beautiful friend who, and they often used to just pop in for a cup of tea or something. She'd rally everybody else because nobody was aware that I was failing. She could see it. I don't know how she did, but she was beautiful. She'd say, right, everyone, it's time to go. And off they'd tootle.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for that, you know, that she could be there when I couldn't speak up for myself. You know, and so I'd say the fourth thing is to really look at your personal boundaries. You know, we spend so much of our lives doing what we think other people want us to do when our hearts and our souls they know that's not what we need to be doing right then. You know?
Well, that's, I think, a big one. So I can just hear people go, well, that's so easy to say, but everybody around me is sick or negative or, you know, tapped into all that. I would love to have positive friends, but that's just not going to happen. And they're my whole support team. I just can't like walk out of my family, like because I'm sick, I don't have income, you know, so they're in this story right now that there's no support for them. So is your book going to be that first step in getting support, or what would you suggest?
Yeah. So I enlisted a beautiful coach, Patty Villalobos. She is a boundaries queen, and I got her to actually write the section on how to create personal boundaries, and in a way that was using examples so that people could actually examine it and how to practice your boundaries. And the one thing that if you can get written on your heart and your mind, that no is a complete sentence.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've heard that before, but I always love it.
So just remind yourself that it is a complete sentence, because one of the ways to obviously enforce your boundaries, now it's going to be difficult when you've not ever set boundaries and that you feel disempowered. So you practice in areas that actually are not going to have huge consequence. So for example, somebody wants you to go and do something with them.
No.
Thank you for the invite. I won't be coming. And leave it at that. You don't need to explain yourself. Okay. And this is what we do. We tend to think we have to justify and explain. So just using that as a personal boundary. So in the book, it's actually about getting clear on your personal boundaries, and then how to implement them, and then how to get the support that you need, whether it's physical support, emotional support, you know, whatever aspect of support that you need for where you're at right now. Another example is my daughter she's just the most beautiful soul, and I love having my grandchildren come and visit, but they create happy chaos and mess. So the house looks like sort of crazy turmoil. Mm-hmm. Whenever they have left, she's there and she helps me to get that house back in order, because she knows aesthetically a clean and tidy house is good for me energetically too.
Right.
So it's that kind of support. You know, before I was so self-reliant that I never asked for help.
Well, I think
So,
that's a very key one, because this is what the universe is really showing to us now. It's not about doing, it's about being open to receiving, because after all, we were given these bodies to start out with. We didn't do anything to get them. And hence, that's one of the reasons why we need to listen to our body and start to say no. That's like a perfect one. So where can they get your book, Bev?
it's in pre-order now, and it's at hopeinardarktunnel.com. And because I'm doing pre-order, I've created high-value bundles so that people can get much more value for their pre-order. And, you know, so you could get the ebook version, the print book and a journal. And I'm hoping to raise enough money to do an audio book, because somebody who's unwell, sometimes reading and comprehending is just too difficult.
Awesome. So we'll have the links below also, but if this resonates with you or anybody else you know, because pretty much every one of us knows too many people that are suffering silently or loudly, one or the other, and this would be a great start for them to get the hope while they're in the dark tunnel. So thank you so much for being with us, Bev.
Oh, thank you. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to share my journey, but to encourage others to come with me. Let's thrive together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.